Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. This podcast can be found on, I guess it's Apple Podcasts, not iTunes anymore. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, pretty much any place you can find podcasts. Also, it's on YouTube when they're not censoring us. If you go to youtube.com, I think type in Annette Talks, you'll find it. And you can see what we look like. My last episode, YouTube kept up. The episode before that, you'll see is missing because they took it down. And my name's Annette Bybee. I often forget to introduce myself, but this is my podcast. And I'm super excited today because we have a lady who came over from Cuba. We've said refugee or exile, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But I am today joined by Mailyn Salabarria. See, I try to roll the R's. I can't really. Hi, Mailyn.
Hi, Annette. How are you?
Good. Can you pronounce your last name? Because you do it in a fun way.
It's Salabarria. It's the perfect last name to help you learn how to roll your R's in Spanish.
Salabarria. All right.
Yes.
I was doing the emphasis on the wrong syllable there. So. Anyway, it was a joy meeting you through DK, our common friend, and he's been on my podcast several times because he's my Constitution expert. But ever since I heard about you, I've thought I need to get you on to the podcast because you came over from Cuba and now you live in the US where things are kind of weird. And so I thought it'd be nice to get a comparison and hear what your experience was like there. So you came over in 2001, right?
Yes. I did, and I want to start saying that, thank you for having me. I, again, don't consider myself any scholar or anything. I'm like a simple Cuban girl trying to make a life and a better future for herself and her family in the United States. And yes, I have been here since 2001. And yes, this last year has felt very weird. That is a very nice way to put it.
Yeah, I thought this would be the perfect time to talk to someone who came from a closed communist society, because I think most of us Americans got a little tiny taste of that, especially when things started disappearing off shelves at the grocery store. You go there and there's no toilet paper, there's no wipes, disinfectant wipes, things there was a lot of things missing for just a short time. And so for some of us, we thought, oh my gosh, this is what it must feel like. We are so spoiled here that we have so much choice. You go to the store and I'll complain if they don't have my exact brand and my exact, flavor or whatever, but we are spoiled because most countries do not have that. And so I wanted to hear what life was like for you in Cuba and why you decided to come over, and then what you saw as the difference here in 2001, and then moving forward to what things have been like in the last year and a half. Because right now we are in May of 2021. If you're listening to this podcast down the line, we're May 2021. And the mask mandate has just been lifted in many places. Things are all pretty much open up, but now there's this whole vaccine thing. And so we're still in a weird place, but we're starting to open up from one of the most closed down, or the only closed down time that I've ever lived through in this country. So tell us, I was gonna say in a nutshell, but I don't know how you can nutshell Cuba, but tell us what it was like. Try and give us an idea of what it was like.
I was gonna say, putting the story of any Cuban in a nutshell is pretty hard. We normally have this saying that, kind of very conversational speaking, that every time that you meet a Cuban that has been able to leave the island, you can literally write a book with that person's story. So kind of putting that in a nutshell, it's itself a challenge. And then dealing with the personality of people like my generation that were born and raised under Castro's Cuba, under censorship and all kind of repressions. Once that we're out in the free world, you literally have to hit us with a baseball bat in our head for us to shut up. So that's kind of a challenge itself. And kind of trying to wrap it around this last year. I think that the best way to put it for most people that have had a life experience like mine, it's for us, it has been in one sense, it has been like some sort of like PTSD experience. It's like having that realization that, oh my God, I am going all over the same thing again. Like, what have I done? You know, like I escaped Cuba. I came to this country. I had my children here. I was hoping, I decided to start from the scratch with 2 suitcases and $200 in my pocket, thinking that I was going to leave something better for my children's future. And look at what I have around me. So those are like really grounding in a very scary fashion type of moments. And they happen a lot in the past year and a half. And then at the same time, you have like, again, this Cuban spirit and ingenuity, which I truly believe is the only thing that made us survive a collectivism, communist, totalitarian society before. That is like, oh, girl, I got you covered. I have 27 years of experience in living without toilet paper or you know, not knowing what I'm going to get in the grocery stores because the aisles are totally empty. I survived for 27 years. I'm surely not going to die this one here because of that. It's like we are like the scholars of prepping for this type of situation, if you would say. So it's that kind of like mixed feelings when you face something like what has happened, not only in the United States, to be honest, it has happened all over the world in the past year and a half, roughly.
It's just that I didn't expect that here. You know, it's not shocking to hear about something like that in Italy or, you know, even some of the other European countries that you don't think of as being all that open. It was nice to hear that Sweden decided to stay open, but the US, this is supposed to be the last place on earth you would expect to see this.
Exactly. And then it's, I mean, I knew I have been here now for 20 years. I have seen the red flags left and right everywhere. I have been literally getting red in my face calling them. And most of the time, if you have ever kept track of the news from South Florida or any other place where you have like a biggest Cuban American community, we're just like the crazy Cubans. We are like the extremists. We're this and that. And then after this year and a half, I have had countless people that I've said, it's really bad. Yes, but guess what? I told you so, and you didn't hear me, or you didn't want to believe me, or you didn't pay attention to the red flags. So in that sense, I mean, obviously it's not what I want. It's not what anybody wants, but it's not like you're looking for a vindication either, but it's like, we told you about it. We already lived it. Some of the us didn't even survive it. They didn't make it. Those that were able to get out, we are seeing those familiar concerning signs. We have been seeing it for years. And again, sadly, you know, my fellow Americans kind of with this mentality of taking everything that we have for granted, that, and this goes from everything. This goes from toilet paper to constitutionally guaranteed individual rights. You have never seen or lived anything different, and you think that the entire life has been like that. And unfortunately, when you go back in history and you look at cases of totalitarian countries like Cuba, what happened to Venezuela, communist countries in Eastern Europe, until that very moment when you lose everything that you open your eyes, and guess what? It's usually late.
Yeah.
And then it usually takes a bloodbath to get yourself out of that hole. And I don't think...
It's funny because I spend so much time on Facebook talking about these things, you know, and questioning the mask mandates, the propaganda about vaccines, the lockdowns, everything. And I recently had someone, I don't know why she decided to question me on everything, but say to me, oh, there's always something to complain about. Because I was saying how New York, you have to have a vaccine passport to go into restaurants and bars and things. And that's a big deal in New York, right? That's their bread and butter. And that's what New Yorkers are there for, right?
Like the Bronx Zoo, there is like a list of 10 or 12 places that you even get free entrance. You don't have to pay the tickets if you show your immunization card.
Yeah, and so I said how this was terrible and how it looked like a caste system was starting to form, right? And so this lady says, oh, there's always something to complain about, isn't there? And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is how you lose your free society. This is how you lose your rights, by just saying, oh, no big deal. You know, it'll be over soon. It'll go to the Supreme Court. Well, maybe it will, and maybe it won't. But if we sit back and say, oh, well, no big deal, then of course it's going to keep happening and keep happening. It's only when we push back and say we're not doing this and, you know, challenge everything that we maintain the freedoms and we get
I mean, just look at Cuba. It's been 62 years and nothing have changed, because every time that somebody dares to literally get their head out and question and you know, and protest or stand up for their rights or what they believe, what happens to them? They get beat up in the middle of the street, they get arrested, they have even gotten shot and killed without a due process, and then they just learn the family where the body is probably a month or two after the fact. So what do we have to wait until we are there? Because I think that the argument that I used to hear before, like, oh no, that's never gonna happen here, we have this, we have that, and I'm like, no, we have been literally the frogs in the boiling water for decades. Yeah. Whoever thinks that this happened in the last 8 years or the previous 8 years is just not paying attention. This has been in the works, the diminishing of the freedom and individual liberties in this country, sadly, as has been for me a realization to see that, has been in the work for decades now. We are literally the frogs in that pot with the boiling water. Somebody have been, you know, cranking it up little by little, and we are still thinking, oh yeah, this is like the new hot tub. We're cool, yeah, nothing is gonna happen here. So what exactly there has to happen? I mean, if this past year and a half wasn't a line in the sand for everybody out there with a couple of, you know, working brain cells, I don't know. I don't know what would be. I really don't know what would be. So yeah, just to kind of like go back to your initial question, it's been a very eye-opening, scary, very complex feelings past year and a half for someone like me. I left Cuba in 2001, came to the United States through Miami. Going back to the exiled refugee.
Yeah, because the exile, which is I actually looked up the definition because, you know, I put refugee. And
it's a super interesting one.
And DK says, oh, exile is much cooler. And then someone else said, well, exile is when the government kicks you out. So I did look up the definitions. And the first one, exile, is the state of being barred from one's native country, typically for political or punitive reasons. And a refugee is a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster.
So, and then it's funny because when you look at the definitions, even in Spanish, they're like a little bit different. But I would say that, yes, mostly when you say exile, it's like more purely when you're being politically persecuted by the government in place at that moment, as opposed to refugee, it's like a more broader scope, if you would say, of reasons. It could be war, it could be natural disaster, it could be some sort of persecution, it could be some sort of like, you know, repression or something like that, without necessarily having to be like the big one political exile that, you know, gets on the news and everybody knows about it. Right. And I think that you have a mix of both with the in the case of Cuba. Probably at the beginning, when Castro took over in 1959, you would say like political exiles the most. And then a couple of decades into the dictatorship being in power, it kind of like became a little bit more of everything else, like that kind of like refugee status. Obviously, the United States always being the #1 biggest destinations, but it's the same situation with any other Cuban that has been able to leave the island and settle in another country or any other part of the world. So yeah, I think in my case, you know what? I actually have never thought about it that much. I'm not, remember I was born and raised in Castro's Cuba. So like by default, I was, you know, born and grew up in this society of levels and labels and divisions, and the family that left are the evil worms, the traitors, and the ones that are here are like, you know, the definition of altruism and the good ones and this and that. So obviously with that background in my life, my natural tendency as a person is to reject labels and names and stereotypes, because I firmly believe that they promote division. Mm-hmm. And as the old saying says, divide and conquer. And guess who's going to be the conqueror in the whole picture? It ain't going to be me. Right. It's going to be someone else, most likely, right, in the government with the power of the state behind them.
So you were raised to believe that the people that stayed voluntarily in Cuba were the good ones, that were doing the right thing, and they cared about everybody else. And the people that left were terrible, selfish traitors.
Yeah, they were the traitors. And actually, we don't even use the word voluntarily in Cuba anymore. That's such a broad, different term. And I can give you a quick example, like the volunteer work in Cuba you would do on the weekends after you're done with the school, or in your work if you were an adult working. It wasn't actually volunteer, it was mandatory. If you didn't go and work on the fields or whatever cleaning they would send you to do, you would get in trouble. So that itself, you know, it's the total opposite of the definition of something being voluntary.
But they called it volunteer.
I mean, exactly. So when you say, well, the people who voluntarily stay in Cuba, no, most people are not there voluntarily. They are there because they didn't have a choice. Mm-hmm. They are there because they are still, nowadays, they are the person that I was 20 years ago when I didn't have a chance to leave. Mm-hmm. I was not there because after I opened my eyes, I realized that, oh yes, I believe in collectivism and I want this. No, I was simply waiting my right time, finding a way to leave. So, and I think that most generations of Cubans in the island are on that situation now. It costs a lot of money to get out. I mean, you need to have a family or somebody out there. And after the past Democratic administration scraped down the Cuban Adjustment Act, that, by the way, was even helping Venezuelan refugees coming and getting some sort of like temporary status in the United States, it got even worse. So yeah, that's kind of like, I mean, the whole concept that we have as something being voluntarily, or even a Cuban person having the choice to say, oh, I'm going to stay here because I believe this, or I'm going to leave because I don't agree. It doesn't work like that in a totalitarian society like Cuba. It's not like that, especially with younger generations. If you talk to them now, yeah, they're still stuck in there because they haven't gotten the chance to get out. Give them the chance in 24 hours, and in 24 hours, their definition of voluntarily is going to change. I can tell you that for sure. Interesting.
That's like very 1984, very Orwellian, right? Where you control the language.
Exactly. And that's the society that I grew up with. I mean, granted, now I have been out of Cuba for 20 years. You have like a new generation of younger Cubans that, even with the censorship and, you know, technology limitations and all that, the fact that now they have some limited access to social media, that the family living abroad can, you know, bring them a phone or a computer or something like that. It's like that little drop of water that starts to kind of like erode a dam. Mm-hmm. Granted, it's going to take another 62 years to actually see some tangible change and impact, but it's quite different from where I was there. I mean, there was no internet. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I left Cuba in 2001, for crying out loud, I didn't know how to use a microwave. I learned to use a microwave in 2001. Wow. I learned to use a washing machine with the little drawer that you open and you put the soap on it. Those that they're called HEs, high efficiency something now, at age 27. And just don't do the math of my age, but you know, that should give you an idea. Like the whole concept of, oh, I'm working and my employer is paying me with a check. And then I have to put that check in the bank. And then I write another check to pay the electricity. I mean, I'm a visual learner. So it took me a while to kind of like wrap that process in my head.
How was it different in Cuba?
Because whatever you get paid in cash, and you stay away from the bank as much as you can, which I probably would do here now as well. But that's a whole different story.
Well, explain to us, why would you stay away from the bank?
Because it's controlled by the government. Why would you want to put anything of your hard-earned money in the hands of the government?
Because they would are you saying they would take it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they have the power and the resources to do whatever they want with your money, with your life, with everything. So, I mean, things like that, where like, I wouldn't say cultural shocks, but definitely changes, things that you know, you just cannot wrap your head around when you have lived and grown up your entire life in Cuba the way I did.
And what are some of the biggest differences? I want to try and feel what it was like to be there, like a typical day or typical day in the life of a Cuban.
Well, I wasn't scared last year about the toilet paper scarcity, for example. And I know it might not be like the most ladylike topic, but I grew up without toilet paper. I mean, we have to use old newspapers in the bathroom. So for me, that was like, oh, you guys are going to have a heart attack in King Supers because you couldn't get toilet paper? That ain't going to happen with me. I'm telling you, sister, I have 27 years of experience surviving this type of thing. So that would be one example. And I don't know, like those, you know, that mentality of like living in a scarcity.
I was just
my normal, you know.
Was the word that was going through my mind. Is it sounds like you were used to scarcity, like if
exactly, like
store you wouldn't have stuff.
Let me use the opposite example. When I first came to the state, I remember I lived in Miami like for the first 3 years and a half before I moved to Colorado, and I remember going to the grocery stores, and I would just I need toothpaste, and I would just stand in that aisle like for minutes, and I'm like, what is this? I would literally feel that the toothpaste were just falling on my head because I only need one, and I have like I don't know how many different types. Why it has to be so complicated? And it's that mentality of, you know, always getting one tube of toothpaste, mostly made in Russia, because that was my years in Cuba when Cuba was a satellite being, you know, it was a pipeline directly from Moscow, and everything we got from toilet paper to soap to food to toothpaste was made in Russia. You're used to that one thing. And then all of a sudden you have this freedom, you have all these choices. And guess what? You have to learn how to be free. You have to learn how to have choices, because I never had that before.
So I'm trying to picture then the store, a little store in Cuba. I almost picture like a corner store in New York. What are those? Those are called, I can't remember.
The little bodegas.
Yeah, bodega. Thank you.
Yeah, it's, in a crumbled down building that is falling. You feel that the balcony or the door is going to fall on your head while you're doing these long lines to get one piece of bread under the rationing book. And then if you eat that bread in the morning, you're not going to eat it at night. And then if you have a child, usually the mom or the dad don't eat the bread. So the kid can have the bread in the morning for breakfast, and they can pack the other one to eat something in school. That's the Cuba I grew up on. Like, we have our toys. Obviously, Castro and the Communist Party, you know, erased Christmas and everything that had to do with Santa Claus and Christmas celebrations. There were times in Cuba when I was a child in the 70s and early 80s that putting a Christmas tree in your house could land you in jail, because somebody from the committees from the Defense of the Revolution, which is like the neighborhood watch, the brown shirts that would, rat you out and snitch you with the government and the police. If they would see a Christmas tree in your house, you will get the police knocking on your door. So that's how I grew up. And then the government took over the rationing of toys exactly the same way that they ration everything else, because, you know, socialism and collectivism is widely known for being a very inefficient, productive system. So obviously at some point, everything is going to get rationed. And then I remember it was January 6th, which roughly falls into the Feast of the Epiphany, Cuba being a colony from Spain. Obviously, Catholic religion is like the biggest one and the strongest one that has survived all these 60 years of communism. And there was a rationing for the toys. You will get 3 toys. And then parents will have to do lines where they will have to sleep in the lines in the store a week before to get the toys. And then if you were the lucky one, maybe you won't get one bicycle or a doll. But if your mom and your dad were like mine, that they didn't like to make lines for weeks, my toys usually were the equivalent of the $1 stuff that you get in the dollar store here, like, you know, like the little Joyo or like the little top and that kind of thing. So just imagine coming and growing up in a place, in an environment like that. And again, having to stand in a grocery store with, I don't know, 100 different type of toothpaste and oral hygiene products. And I'm like, how do I know what I need? Or how do I know which one I'm going to pick?
Yeah, I'm having a really hard time because all of a sudden my brain wants me to start crying because I cannot imagine as a mother having to decide if my children are going to get the bread, you know, and who's going to get the bread and who's going to get the toys. I just hope a lot of people are going to listen to this because I do not think that people really understand what living under socialism or communism really means. They think it sounds like a great idea, but they don't understand the reality of it. Obviously I don't really understand the reality of it because it's hitting me hard. The other thing I wanted to ask you is you said that Christmas was outlawed. So, and most of you are Catholic there. Were you not allowed to go to church at all? Was this something that completely shut down? Or?
No, like for example, in my case, in my generation, I was never baptized in Cuba because if they would find out, my mom and my dad would have been kicked out of their jobs. They would have been ostracized completely.
So you had the choice, but
so whatever religion or anything related to faith, I mean, basically it became a competition. And how in usual Catholic houses you have, like the Jesus images and things like that. They were substituted by pictures and portraits of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, exactly as Chinese people how to do in their houses with the portraits of Mao. It's exactly the same thing, just in a tropical weather and a different language, but it was the same thing. Anything that I learned, for example, related to religion or faith, it was like by osmosis or kind of like default through my mother or through my maternal grandmother. I remember my grandma, she lived in a rural town and she used to go to a small Christian church, Bible-based Christian church. And she would have her Bible and her Jesus Christ images hidden inside her closet.
Wow.
It could not be out I got baptized here in Fort Collins, Colorado in 2010 in the same ceremony with my son. So things like that, it's like the ones that you try to explain sometimes to people, and it's just, and I totally understand. I don't blame them. They have never learned in history or in school what it's about. They probably have never heard from somebody like us, escaping totalitarian collectivist societies, what it really is. That kind of like instinct of always being in survival mode because your normal is the scarcity. And then at the same time, not realizing that is exactly like Orwell wrote in his book, Animal Farm, which is, by the way, the first book that I read when I left Cuba, because obviously it was banned there, is that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Why? Because by the time I was in high school, I am going into the university in Cuba, I realized that not everybody was living in the same scarcity that we were. That when you are in the higher elites of the ministries or the Communist Party or the military or the government, you live like people in, high-end neighborhoods in Boulder or here in Denver live today. So you see that, and then what is really like appalling or amazing in a way to say for me is that a lot of people in the United States, especially young ones, that's the part that they don't want to see. They say, oh, well, yeah, the misery in Cuba or in Venezuela or in China, it's for whatever excuse. It wasn't implemented right. Yeah, sure. So they think that they are assuming that they're going to be in the elite that is deciding and redistributing the products created by someone else. So they never have paused to consider, okay, what if I end up not being in the elite? What if I end up being in the second-class citizen? What if I end up being not in this 1% that I hate so much in the United States today, but in the other 99%, which is the majority of human beings in any collectivist totalitarian society? They are not, that is not being computed in their heads the proper way. And sadly, they're setting themselves for a rude awakening if they don't switch the way that they analyze those things.
Well, and we're about to get a little taste of that in some areas in the country with this whole vaccination thing, because you're already seeing places like New York with the vaccination. You have to have a vaccine card to get into bars and restaurants. So if enough of us do not stand up to this, we're going to see a little caste system built up here where you've got the vaccinated with their little cards, you know, their little vaccine passports or their little vaccination cards that can go anywhere, do anything. And then there's going to be the unclean, right? That don't have, to choose not to get vaccinated either because they already had COVID, so they have antibodies, so they don't need it, or they don't trust it, and or for whatever reason, because we live in a country where we're allowed to make that choice, right? And so those people like us that are unclean, well, as what was it, Biden said, you either get the vaccine or you wear the mask. That's
I'm like, it doesn't work like that.
Your choice, right? So in other words, you are either one of the good people that you don't care about everyone and you go and get the vaccine and then you get to have all the perks of normal living, right? Or if you're that unclean person that decides not to get the vaccine, well, you keep your little mask on and you don't come in here and you don't go in there. You don't work for a school district, Aurora School District, which is not far from here, has just decided that all their employees, and I heard all their students must have the vaccine, right? So, and I've heard several colleges now that are requiring their students to get the vaccine before they come back to school. So we're setting up a caste system. And if some people want to get a little hint of what it's like to live in a society where not everyone's equal, that's where we're heading towards. And, you know, I'm not planning on getting the vaccine. The more I'm pushed on it and pushed with propaganda, the less I want to do it. But really, it's not about the vaccine. It's about the choice. And so even if I did decide to get the vaccine, and I would never put it on Facebook, I'll tell you what, because I'm not going to virtue signal it. But even if I did decide to get it and I had my little card, I will not be showing that card. And I will not be going any place where they require that little card because it's not right. It's a segregating society into
exactly. So I have two thoughts about that. I mean, obviously, again, this is something that I have been talking about and seeing happening around me for, I would say mostly, I started kind of like getting these red flags when I moved to Colorado in 2001. Obviously, the first years when you come to the United States, to a place like from a third country, like you're literally, the way that I describe my life is like you are inside a washing machine. You know, and you see everything like it's like spinning around you. I mean, I'm literally busy learning how to write a check and how to use a microwave. So trust me, I'm not going to have a lot of time or brain power left to think about natural rights and individual freedom. So that kind of like process kind of like sound out down in me, mostly, I would say, around the time that I moved to Colorado, that I have my first kid and all that. And obviously everything kind of like went up into asteroids in the past year and a half. And I think that it revolved around two things, two phenomenons or issues that I see the most. One is like taking things for granted. Taking things for granted in the way that you're really not going to appreciate what you had before until it's completely gone. And then if you are not learning and listening from experiences of people like us that are coming, you know, from Venezuela, from Cuba, from China, for, you know, any of the countries that used to be the Eastern Socialist bloc in Europe or what used to be the Soviet Union, if you are not, you know, seeing our life experiences as a way to ground yourself and have that critical thinking, you know, like in full overdrive into, oh, wait, hold on a second. This is going into a direction that I think it's not the best for everybody. Right there, you're setting yourself for a rude awakening. And the other thing, it has to do with government control and with individual choices. I have worked in healthcare here in Colorado. I did for almost 10 years.
I'm glad we're getting to healthcare because
and I am very, very passionate about it because I work with underserved population that has not only cultural barriers, but also language barriers. I am a person that I learned what informed consent was when I came to the United States. Okay. In Cuba, they do the vaccinations in the schools and your parents don't even know what you're being injected. Okay. And granted, it's not the same amount that, for example, my kids have gotten here or anything like that. So that's right there. Let's just set it very clear right there. So after I learned what is informed consent in my professional work, after I learned the way that is being manipulated, after I have seen the way that it's being manipulated with my own elderly parents who are limited English speakers that I was able to get out of Cuba and now live with me. And the way that individual choice is being put, and I'm like, this doesn't add up. And then everybody's blindly following that line. What you were saying about the segregation, I mean, I usually get very sarcastic about it because it's something that really gets under my skin. It's like, okay, what's going to be next? Are you going to ask me on which shoulder I want the yellow star, the left or the right one? Or whatever happened to HIPAA and my right to privacy and my protected health information. It's none of your business. What, do you want to see my immunization card? What else? Well, I have the results of my last pap smear and the video from the colonoscopy. Would you like me to show you those as well? You know, because and then people don't realize that they have, and I think the most powerful tool that we have, not only here in the United States, I mean, I think this is like a survival skill that anybody that has lived in a totalitarian society will probably be able to explain you one way or the other, is owning ourselves as individuals. And yeah, maybe I cannot vote my way out of this. Maybe I'm not going to change anybody's mind on Facebook. But you know what? On a daily basis, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to be grateful because I am in the United States and not in Cuba, and I'm going to live that day of my life as the most free individual in the world, regardless of what the power and control freaks are trying to do around me. That business is going to ask me to put a mask. I'm going to do a 180 on it like I did on a store the other day, and I'm like, I changed my mind. I'm going to spend my money somewhere else. Why? Because I have this obnoxious habit of putting my money where my mouth is. And unless we all start doing that in our little bubbles and small spheres of influence, which means our house, our kids, our family, we're really not going to be able to see any change. And I think that at this point, that's what it is. That's what I did with this entire year and a half. Granted, I was in South Carolina. The type of work that I do, it's mostly outside, but I was never in lockdown and I never wore a mask, and I'm not planning to start doing it now. Hell no.
You know what? I wanted to ask you about that because when, you know, first they said we don't need masks, right? That was the first original line. Oh, healthy people don't need masks, right? That was what Dr. Fauci said at the beginning. And then also that changed and everyone started to wear them. And I remember I was like, no, I don't want to wear one. But when I started seeing everybody wear them, for example, at Target, that's like my favorite store, right? I used to go there all the time. And you walk in and you see everybody with masks. And it occurred to me very quickly that one of the biggest problems with this was that it was highly visible whether or not you were conforming.
Yes.
And so it became this, are you going to conform and do the right thing for everyone or not? And so I was purposely not wearing it as much as I could until it was, you know, I didn't have a choice a lot of places. But because I had to substitute in the schools, and you have no choice in the school.
Yeah. It is, and the way that I explained it to several people at the beginning of last year when all this started, and it's kind of like funny because I wore between 2 states and I kept flying and all that with no problems. But the way that I explain it, and part of these flashbacks that I was trying to draw, you know, the parallels, it's like when I was a kid in Cuba, and then in the school, you have to wear like the red, we call it pañoleta, which is like a red scarf with your school uniform. And then let's say kids that were families that were Jehovah's Witnesses, they're not supposed to wear any symbols that is not that of their religion. So they would go to school. Their parents would still send them to school, but they would not wear that. And those kids were being bullied. And that bullying was promoted by the teachers, by the school administrators, by the neighborhood, by the government, by authorities in all levels. And then that was one of the first things when the whole mask mandates started. I'm like, this is exactly the same sick and twisted psychological move behind what they're doing with this mask here. It's promoting the snitches. And then nobody's using critical thinking anymore. Like common sense has left the building, like for good. Because I mean, if we could go into this debate of science until the cows come home, literally. But the minute that you try to settle in the stone, you stop being a scientist. You stop questioning, and then you are not going to be doing any good to the rest of humanity. We are where we are here in the 21st century because whoever started doing experiments when we were still in the cave never set their results in stone. And the next day they were questioning themselves and trying to find something different. Mm-hmm. So, and then personally, I never believed that the whole mandates and all this was about the virus. Yeah. For me, again, it was a flashback with things like that in Cuba. Like if you didn't have your pañoleta in a school, then, you know, it was a way to visually segregate people and know, okay, these are the revolutionaries that are with me and with the government. These are the ones that are not questioning my power. And then these are the rebels. These are the rabble rousers. These are the ones that are going to create problems with me. It is exactly, it might be in a different language, in a different situation, but the result and the psychological mechanism behind it are exactly the same, And then going back to that is just promoting that segregation again. It's like, oh, I got it on the news the other day. I don't know. I think it was a baseball stadium or something like that that was going to have like separated areas for people that can prove they are vaccinated and the other ones no. And when I read about it, and I'm like, okay, cool. Look at this. So wow, we're going to have like cool lights for the colored people on the left, and cool lights stand and hot dog stand for the non-colored people on the right. I mean, history is repeating again, and people are not realizing. And then just to add insult to injury, we're not seeing that it's not even a partisan or politics issue anymore. This is the state against our natural individual rights. And we're not even going there in the conversation.
My mantra on Facebook recently has been either you're a collectivist or you're a constitutionalist. You're either going to believe in the individual rights or you believe in collectivism and that we're doing everything for the greater good. And that's it. I mean, you've got to choose a side. And to kind of force everyone into masks, that's collectivism.
That is worshiping the state. Yeah.
And one of the biggest examples of why the vaccine thing is obviously very political is that it's either vaccinated or unvaccinated. There's no, I've had COVID and I have antibodies. I'm going to go and get a test this week because I'm pretty sure I had COVID. And I'm hoping to get a positive antibody test because I would like to hold this up as I have the antibody card. Does that not count for anything? I would love to have that as a legal test, because let's talk about whether or not this is really about creating herd immunity or not, because it really obviously is not. You don't need 100% of people to have a vaccine to have herd immunity. But that's the way the government's handling.
It's about fear. It is about fear, because the more scared and the more paranoid and the more panic we are, the easier it is for the government to control us. It is sheer fear. Exactly the same way, to kind of like connect it to my background, exactly the same way that I grew up in Cuba. Always we have to do this military exercise and preparations and learn how to clean and train and shoot with an AK-47 because, oh my God, the Americans are going to invade us. And then, you know, it's generations of people growing with that fear. And then the Americans became like this boogeyman, you know, in masses and masses of people that were being brainwashed with that. Because I don't know if you know, but everything that happens in Cuba, whether Castro was alive or not, was the fault of the Americans, you know, whether it was a dead crop, that it was dead because of their poor management of it, or flu or mosquitoes or whatever, it was always the fault of the Americans. You know, they are the holier than you, nothing was ever their fault. And now it's kind of like the same thing. It's like this boogeyman and this fear. And that's how people are not using common sense or their critical thinking skills anymore, because they are literally frozen and paralyzed by this government promoted fear. Why? Because that way it is easier for them to control us as a society in general.
And so are you seeing parallels between the big tech censorship? Because obviously anytime you post anything on Facebook that's got COVID or masks or vaccine or whatever, that little, they add that little thing to it that says for COVID information.
Yep.
And when I did an episode with Dr. Barkey, who's one of America's frontline doctors, who was one of those that stood on the steps of the Supreme Court building, right?
Yes.
And said, you know, I can never say hydroxychloroquine or whatever, and these other things, they will cure COVID. And you know, all these doctors that came out were like, we want to give you the correct information. We want to give you another way to look at this, right? So I did an interview. I did 2 with him. I hope YouTube doesn't look back and see I had another episode with him several months ago, but I did one with him a few weeks ago. Well, and I set it to post on YouTube. I got an email and said, nope, we're not posting this because it's misinformation. And so I'm wondering how that compares to Cuba, because obviously that's not the government censoring.
It's out of the school of state security censorship in Cuba. I'm telling you, it is exactly the same. It's just that now we are like in an era with more technology, but it's exactly the same. I mean, it's exactly the same. For example, if we were in Cuba and we were having, let's say, phone calls with any families or relatives living abroad, like you literally have to speak in code when they were asking you when the situation was there, because obviously all the phones were tapped, everything was being listened to, and the same thing with, you know, letters on the mail. For example, I have 2 siblings that are German. My dad's first wife is German, so my brother and my sister, they're Germans too. Obviously nobody believed we are related, but when they, you know, see us standing to each other, and I remember they would, you know, we'll communicate through letters in the mail that they would take 3-4 months to go from one place to the other, and the actual government controlled post office in Cuba, they will open the letters, they will open the package, they would steal anything that would come in there, and they would read the letters. So we have right now exactly the same thing. When many people ask me, how come, you know, a totalitarian, tyrannical government has stayed in place in Cuba for so many years, why people don't take up the streets and this and that? And then I have to go over this explanation. It is a very well thought power and control process that they have implemented since day one. Whoever has read Saul Alinsky's book, it's gonna see that's the handbook is coming out of there. One of the first things that they used, obviously, was the constitutional changes when Castro took over. The constitution that we had in Cuba, the constitution from 1940, was based and modeled after the US Constitution. So obviously it was based on natural rights, a limited role for the government, the protection of private property, private enterprise, religious freedoms, and even went before to even clearly detail the right to vote, the prohibition of discrimination based on race and all that. One of the first things that Castro did when he took over was eliminating that constitution. And then he confiscated the firearms. He completely eliminated that. And then when you combine that with censorship of media, when the government starts controlling the media, censorship, add the division of the nuclear family, breaking down the nuclear family by sending your kids to boarding school when you are in middle school and high school, which is like the most critical age where parents have to be with their children. All the brainwashing on controlling public schools from kindergarten to 12th grade, and obviously colleges, exactly as we see it around us here in the United States today. When you combine all those things, that's how you get 62 years of a totalitarian regime in power with people that feel literally castrated from birth because they are unable to take out on the streets and do something about it. And then you see cases like it's happening now with these activists and artists and performers in Havana that are being kept in prison in their own house. That this Luis Manuel Alcántara, which is a sculptor and painter that was in a hunger strike, he was not even asking for the government to go down. He was asking for freedom of expression for him as an artist, and for the government to return his properties, his paintings, and his work that they stole without proper compensation. And he was kidnapped from his house, and he's being held in a hospital ward now, obviously, you know, being guarded by state security and police and government officers 24/7. So that's what happened, you know, after you have so many years of government controlling and putting in place this way of control entire society. Granted, it's taking longer in the United States. I mean, they have to be like a little bit more conceited or kind of like backstage. But at the end, the techniques they're using are exactly the same. And censorship and brainwashing and federal government control of public education, it's just some of the examples that made me be born in the Cuba that I was born, because all that allowed Castro and the communists to stay in power until today.
And the reason why it's not going to take hold overnight in the United States is because there are people like me who remember 1976. We remember that was the spirit of 76, right? Like, I'm 52, so I was raised on the Declaration. I was raised on the Constitution. I was raised to believe in natural rights. So there are a lot of us around my age, you know, maybe 40, a little bit older, who were raised on this. So we're the ones that are saying, whoa, what's going on? Everything that is in my DNA, it's in my DNA, right? My ancestors fought for these freedoms. So it's deep in my DNA. So when I see things like the masks and the vaccine cards and all this, there's a part of me that says, what? No, which is why I'm freaking out so badly and shouting from the rooftops and on a podcast and saying, people, wake up, wake up. What are you thinking? Freedom is who we are. Freedom is what we're about. And so hopefully, I'm really, really hoping that enough of the people like me and the people that we raise, because my kids, you know, my kids are in public school, maybe not for much longer, but they go to school and they wear the masks, and then they come out with me and I say, I'm not wearing my mask, child, I'm done. I want you to see me not wear, because we'll go to Target and I'll have my mask off, but they'll have theirs on because that's what school taught them, right? And they will hide around like the corner so people won't see them with me. One of the best things that ever happened was the other day I spoke on the public comment at the school board meeting on Zoom, of course, because they're too afraid to face us in person, right? But I'm sitting there very impassioned saying, no more masks, no vaccine required, you know, don't teach critical race theory, all these things. And they're in the other room listening, right? And they come in and they're like, Mom, I said, you go back and you look at all the other parents, they were all saying the same thing. And so I'm not the weirdo anymore to them. They see other.
I had that conversation with my teenage son not that long ago. And I'm like, I am going to be like the girl from the Hunger Games. Like, I volunteer to be the tribute if you need me to. And he was like, Mom, you already are. But I'm like, yes, you bet I am. It's kind of like funny. Yesterday, I was talking to a girl that she's also a refugee. She came from Bosnia. And we were talking about all this and everything that happened this last year. And we were like literally simultaneously at the same time saying to each other, I cannot believe that we're going through all this all over again. Like, it's like, I mean, I literally have to make a joke out of it because, again, for us Cubans, if we don't laugh of ourselves, we wouldn't have made it this long under Castro. But it's like, there is no way to go in a homemade raft from the United States, right? Like, where are we supposed to go? There is nowhere. By no means, I'm not blind. I know that we have 125 and maybe more problems, but when you put things in perspective in the great schemes of the world, societies, you know, we are still the last hope. And what I cannot believe is that we are letting the greatest experiment of individual freedom in human history go down to hell in a basket case because we prefer the big government or the big state to take care of us without even doing the math behind it to realize that whatever they're doing or they're giving away or redistributing is the fruit of our own labors. We are the producers and they are the moochers. And who gave them the right to give away what I have worked for?
The collectivists, the people that think it's going to be a worker's paradise, right?
Exactly. So it's insane. And the issue with the schools, like during this year, for example, my youngest is 7. I gotta tell you as a disclaimer that I never thought that I was the homeschooling type of person. And I was homeschooled when in the 80s, when homeschooling was not even a thing, because I live in Libya with my parents. My mom and my dad were sent to Libya when Castro and Gaddafi were best buddies. Castro gifted Gaddafi with a road that could double as a military landing strip in case of war. And my dad was working in that project. So it was like a years long project. So he was sent there with my mom and with me. And then we were not like the diplomats in the embassy in Tripoli or anything like that. We were literally in the middle of the desert, okay? Like next to camels and little villages, they have a camp for the Cuban workers. And I lived there for almost 4 years. So I was homeschooling there. Again, when homeschooling was not even a thing in the world. But then I went back to Cuba, and then I got, into the grinding of the government controlled schools and all that. But I never thought that I was the homeschooling type myself until last year, when even going to private independent schools for my youngest daughter, I kind of like draw the line in the sand in a matter of hours with the topic of the mask. And I'm like, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, because the mask is not going to become the Cuban uniform pañoleta symbol of this century of my life in this country with my kids. It's not going to happen over my Cuban dead motionless body, literally. And then I started homeschooling my girls. It was a leap of faith. And guess what? Last week we finished the first cycle. And for me, it has been challenging. I mean, I'm a small business owner. I take care of my parents. And then on top of that, I have to put homeschooling my youngest child into my schedule. It's been very challenging, but it has given me a freedom and a flexibility that I have never found before. And on top of that, I think it has given me like first row seats to literally see how like a light switch went on in my daughter's head. And it has been the most amazing experience with it. We're doing a Christian Bible-based classical curriculum where parents have the freedom to decide how much of religious education or not they want to include in their children's education, which is, in my unsolicited and politically incorrect opinion, the way that it should be, right? And then when all these control with kids started, I remember that my daughter was taking some summer tennis classes, and they were doing like, oh, that's the other thing. For summer, I will only pick things that were outdoors, because I'm not going to have any of my kids indoor with masks for, I don't care, whatever time. Again, I work in hospitals. Trust me, I do know how mask works and how an N95 have to be custom fit in your face if you really want it to work, and how it is used in ORs and all that. So we did that. She started doing last summer the tennis classes. And when it was the first day, they were, asking, doing like the screening thing. And I'm like, okay, this is, your liability. I totally understand. Me as a responsible parent, I mean, I have common sense. If either myself or my child would be sick, we would not be here to begin with, right? You nurse your sickness at home and you keep it away from everybody. And then they started doing the temperature checks. Oh. And they started doing on the kids, putting the thermometer that looks like a firearm in their forehead. And then the very first day, and this was like about a year and a half ago, I was like, no, you're not going to do that to her in her forehead. You can get exactly the same reading on, on the inner side of your wrist. I don't want my child to be socially conditioned, and that is okay to point anything at their head.
I had never even thought about that, but
and then
a Cuban would say, no
way, no how, right? And then like about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we relocated from South Carolina back here in Colorado. And then she started in a dance academy that she had been before. And it was about a month ago when she started. So they were still doing that. And then I dropped her off, obviously, for any extracurricular activity. My first question is, what's your policy on masks? And depending on that, you get my money or not. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, there's no really need to complicate it, right? So she started there, and then I dropped her up. And when I pick her up, she's like, Mom, you know what happened when we were going to start our dance lessons today? And I'm like, no, tell me, what was it? This, well, we did that. We said our names, we introduced ourselves, and then our teacher was asking, you know, the same things if we're sick or not. And then she was taking the temperature of everybody on the heads. But then I just stood up, Mom, and I told her that she needed to do mine on my wrist because my mom and my dad don't want anybody pointing anything at my head. And I'm like, you go, girl.
Good.
You know?
That's awesome.
One lesson learned in this crazy year. That's, if it's only that one, it was worth it. All my sacrifices. That's totally worth it.
So I need to know, because we're running out of time. This is like the best discussion I've ever had on this podcast, I have to tell you. But while we're talking about healthcare, you know, Michael Moore did that movie, right? So I want to tell us about the comparison between what Michael Moore showed as all this awesome healthcare in Cuba to what you really experienced there.
What he showed you was a lie. What he showed you was the hospital and the clinic where the foreigners that goes to Cuba and the tourists go and pay in dollars. He didn't show you the hospitals for regular average Joe Cuban like myself and my family there. And then on top of that, I mean, that's one of my really, really pet peeve topics, because we do have a lot of healthcare professionals in the family. Actually, I still have a cousin there who is a doctor. So we have dentists, we have doctors, we have pharmacists. So we grew up with a lot of people, close family working in healthcare. And what he showed was a lie. He showed you the two hospitals in Havana where people go and pay in dollars. He didn't show you the hospital where my dad almost died when I came out of high school with no toilet paper, disgusting conditions. Like, I mean, and you really don't even have to recreate the wheel anymore. It's everything online. You can Google and you can find the videos and you can find the pictures and you can see the reality. Why? Because it goes back to Animal Farm and all animals are equal and some are more equal than others. There is a caste system. It's like literally like a matrix type of reality where one reality is the one where those high elites of the government and the Communist Party and the tourists that go there or the foreigners that go there live. It's a whole different ball game from the average Cuban that is just, again, working for minimum wage and, you know, going to bread lines every day to get that little piece of bread that is given to them in the rationing book. It's the whole different reality. And whoever doesn't want to see that nowadays in this century where you have social media and internet access, even with the censorship, to do that, then you're choosing to be blind.
It's willful
because the information is out there. You know, it's all a fallacy. Why? Because you don't have the incentive of technology. You don't have monetary incentive. You have brilliant doctors that are working with nothing. Like when I was still in Cuba, when I was finishing the university, I was also working in tourism in the restaurants as a bartender, and I will make more money in tips than what my doctor's cousin would make with her salary. Like the scrubs that she wears right now in hospitals in Cuba are sent to her by us from the United States or from another family that live in Spain. So, I mean, it's when you have the government controlling the resources, sooner or later, it's only a matter of time before you start rationing everything. And yes, that includes rationing human life. Yeah. It includes rationing healthcare and life and, you know, and important medical interventions that could mean saving someone's life.
Oh yeah, because as soon as you start rationing healthcare, as soon as it's a finite commodity, you have to start making decisions of who's going to die. So there's no way around that. I don't know how people don't get that. As soon as you decide that there's only so much healthcare to go around, you got to decide who's going to get it
and then who's going to become the decision maker. Who are you going to trust to be the decision maker?
That's the difference between the government controlling it and the market forces controlling it.
Exactly.
And I don't know why people don't get that. I don't understand. So I have to ask you a few other things then, because there's always that question, you know, whenever we see anything from Cuba, pictures and things, there's always these Chevys from the 50s.
Oh.
Is it still, and also, have you been back since you left?
I have been back only twice in 20 years. In both cases, it has been because I have had serious medical emergencies happening. with my parents before I was able to get them out of Cuba. I haven't been since then. And I have this problem where, you know, I have like this principle, maybe silly, depending on whom you ask, philosophical opposition that I refuse to keep putting my hard-earned money on the pockets of the government that forced me to leave the place where I was born and start my life from the scratch 20 years ago with 2 suitcases and $200 in my pocket. Like I told you before, I have this obnoxious habit, and unless something really, really tugging at my heartstrings happened, I haven't been there since then. Last time was in 2009 because my dad had 2 heart attacks right when I was ready to get him on the plane to come here. I became an American citizen, and then I did all the family reunification process to bring him back. And in the middle of that, when he was ready to fly here, he got that sick. He haven't met my son, and we were told that he was not going to make it. So I had to hop in a plane with my mom that was here, with my 3-year-old kid. I'm taking that so at least my dad could meet my son if something happened. So that was the last time. And then I got to tell you that after 3 or 4 days happened that my dad got out of the ICU and all that, oh girl, I was just ready to hop in a freaking homemade raft and come back here. Because the funny thing, into a sense, that happens is that the same way that 20 years ago, I had to learn how to live as a free individual, as a free person that has 78 different choices of toothpaste in a grocery store. Then when you go back there, then you have to, for a matter of your own safety, you have to censor yourself. And literally you have to have that mental preparation to, okay, I'm going to put duct tape in my mouth because I am not in the United States anymore. And then if I'm going to be here doing this or doing that, you know, I better shut up and keep it quiet, because I don't know, they have now snitches on social media. You don't know who's listening to you. And it's always been this surveillance state everywhere. Is one of the ways that they stay in power for so long. So that's one of the things that kind of like weighs on me a lot. Before that, the fact that it costs a lot of money, the fact that for me to get back to Cuba, I have to pay for a Cuban passport that costs $500, and it's valid for only 2 years because the Cuban government doesn't recognize my American citizenship. So on top of that, if something happens, whatever the United States government can do for me as a citizen of their country is going to be very limited because they don't recognize it. There have been many cases of people that have gone there and I don't know, they have gotten involved, let's say in a car accident, and then they get arrested by the Cuban police. And then all of a sudden overnight, the car accident doesn't matter anymore. And then everything becomes like a political case, like, oh, you are a traitor and you came here to do this on the CIA or whatever, even if it is just, you know, Uncle Juan working in a bakery in Hialeah that just went there and had the bad luck to be involved in a car crash with a bicycle and things like that. So it's kind of like a hard decision to make because you don't know. You're literally stepping into the enemy's territory and you have nobody and nothing to cover your sixes. Nothing. You're on your own back there.
So in like 1 or 2 sentences, I mean, it's pretty obvious now, but in 1 or 2 sentences, why did you leave?
I left because I went through this awakening process. I mean, for some people, it happens right away. For some people, it takes more time. It depends, again, on personal experience and things that you have to live. I realized that, how can I say it? I didn't know what was out in the world, but I realized that what was there was not my calling. I realized that it was not my natural state of being in a totalitarian society. I didn't know how to articulate it back then the way that I do now. I mean, I have all those experiences that open my eyes and literally rip off the curtains of the brainwashing of my entire life, rip them off like in a second. And again, I didn't know how to articulate what I wanted or what I was looking for, but I knew that I was meant for something different. And it was not living under the control of the state or somebody else. Obviously, after years of being outside of Cuba, now I realize that it was, you know, it's that natural state of we as human beings are supposed to be free. We're not supposed to be controlled by anybody else. But back then, I would say it was a compilation and all that. And just to kind of like give you like quick flashes, I was still in Cuba when the rafter crisis with Carter happened, with the Mariel boat leave. I was a kid. I remember the repudiation acts and the eggs being thrown at the houses of the families that were known to have applied to leave. I was still in Cuba when the Clinton rafter crisis, where the Cubans had to be sent to the refugee camps at Guantanamo base. I always live in a you know, very low income workers neighborhood east of Havana. And back then in 94, 93, I saw my neighbors, my, you know, people that went with me to elementary school jumping in a raft right there in the shoreline where we used to live to try to make it to the United States. I was in Cuba when the Cuban government, when Raul Castro ordered the shutdown of the Brothers to the Rescue planes that were rescuing rafters in the Florida Straits. I was in Cuba when Raul Castro gave the order to sink the tugboat with the 30-something families that were trying to live in Havana. I was working in the restaurant that is right there at the entrance of Havana Harbor when that happened. 28 children were killed by the Cuban government, and their only crime was trying to leave the island prison. I was in Cuba when the whole circus with Elian Gonzalez happened. Yeah, so, you know, it was all those things happening that it's like an eye-opening process that made me realize that, okay, this is not for me. And then I reached a point at the end of law school when I was very, very close to graduation after the tugboat sinking, that it was my mom, the one that told me. I'm a single child, by the way, from my mom and my mom. I'm their only kid. And she was the one who told me, you know what, you need to bite your tongue because you only have like a few months left to get your diploma and graduate, but you need to get the hell out of here. Because if you don't leave, you're going to end up in jail with whoever is that you're representing if you decide to go and practice law in this country. And that was like a turning point moment for me. Now that I am a mom, I cannot even fathom sitting with my kid and telling him, I'd rather have you away, even if I don't know when I'm going to see you again, and know that you're going to be safe, that having you here with me under this constant fear that I know that you're not going to be able to censor yourself at some point, that you're not going to shut up, and then you're going to end up in jail.
I have to say, I'm really impressed. And to me, it's a spiritual thing that we all have that little spark in us that says we were created to be free.
So yeah, absolutely.
You were living in a place where that little spark in you said, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. I can't live this way. And that your mom was willing to sacrifice your relationship with her to encourage you to get out. And that you lived with people that were willing to jump in boats.
Yeah.
Risk their lives to get out.
Yeah. And then it's like all those combinations of experiences of things that you see, you know, and at some point, one of them becomes literally the last drop. Yeah. And then after that, you are like, I mean, I'm done. I don't know if it's going to be a raft, a plane, like I don't know.
But you're going.
A pelican, if I can hang into it long enough. But something.
Risk your life to get out, but you're out.
Exactly.
I understand that. And now that you live in this country and you see things the way they are, you're like not.
It's scary. It's very scary.
I'm going to stand by and just allow things to.
It's very scary. And then I have had points where I say, well, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm so discouraged. You know, everybody's blind. Nobody's seeing this. And then I give myself like the pep talk and I say, well, by the time I was born, Cuba was already lost to communism. You know, by the time my generation was born, we were done. Whoever tried to fight had already been killed, had already been put in prison. So my country was lost literally by the time that I was born. Right. I had the chance and the opportunity to leave. I had the chance to say, I'm not going to have kids in Cuba because to live under this repression and this misery with me is going to be more than enough. I am what is considered by American healthcare standards like a late bloomer because I waited so my kids could be born out of that hellhole. So I have had that in here. And then I have had many times, especially this last year, where I said, I cannot believe this is just useless. I mean, I'm not going to change anything. I'm only one person. But then I look at my kids and I'm like, you know what? I have no guarantees that I'm going to be successful. I have no guarantees that I'm actually going to create any change, but I need to be able to be at peace with myself and with my conscience. And moreover, I need to be able to 10, 15, 20 years from now, I need to be able to look at my children's face and tell them, I might have not been successful and maybe I didn't change anything, but I tried. I tried. I did my best. And I did everything that I could with the resources and the opportunity that I was given or that I had around me. And for me, that's my light at the end of the tunnel. Now, that's the way that I have focused my life. I would say mostly after I became a mom.
I feel exactly the same way. I feel like recently, like I almost posted this, but I wanted to say, I may end up dying alone and penniless and not a success by the world standards, but nobody will ever look at me and say, I don't know what she stood for.
Exactly.
And say that. They will never. No. Well, I feel like the founding fathers are looking down on us saying, what are you trying to do to save this country? What are you going to do to save what we established for you? What are you doing? And I'm saying, I'm doing everything that I can. So.
Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a big thing that is going to be all over the news or it's going to be a viral video. Sometimes it's just going with my son to the grocery store and saying, no, they don't have a sign about the mask in there. So I'm going to walk in there maskless. And if they say something, I will put my things back and I will take my wallet and spend my money somewhere else. Because if we don't model that, and again, it goes back to my teenage son joke, like, you know, well, they're going to think that you're the crazy mom. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, mom, everybody knows like you are like the Hunger Games tribute now. I will volunteer. Yes, you can put the crazy sign on me if that means that you are going to learn to stand up for yourself, for your principles, and nobody owns you and nobody will ever own you. It doesn't matter how much repression or censorship or guns get pointed at your head.
Yes.
And if that's the end result, then it will be totally worth it.
Yep.
It will be totally worth it.
Totally. I 100% agree. All right, 2 last questions since we're talking for over an hour now, because it's honestly, this is the best conversation I've ever had.
I told you, when you talk to Cubans, you need to bring a baseball bat if you want us to shut up.
Oh, this is awesome. This is just awesome. All right, so number 1, I'm guessing you're not a fan of Che Guevara.
No. I mean, one of my employments, I have a big deal with the guy that was a supervisor and show up one day wearing a shirt. The best way to keep it simple is I have an excellent book recommendation for anybody that talked to me about Che Guevara. Because again, from kindergarten to 12th grade, I was educated and brainwashed into that Che Guevara was like the last Coca-Cola of the desert type of person. And it turned out it wasn't like that, right? So there is 2 things that I always recommend when this topic comes into the conversation. One is a book written by Humberto Fontova, and it is called The Real Che Guevara and the Useful Idiots Who Idolize Him. So that's a quick primer. Mm-hmm. Another one that I always recommend is this independent movie that was made by Andy Garcia a few years ago. It's called The Lost City. Oh. It's supposed to be a love story, but it's one of those that, you know, if you ever met a Cuban or a Cuban family, or if you're Cuban, like in my case, it really pull at your heartstrings, because it's like a love story that happens in Cuba in those years when Castro took over. And there is a lot of, you know, solid base information about who the real Che Guevara was. So basically, I think that the people that idolize him here, they're clueless. And this is the 21st century. They're choosing to be clueless. They don't want to know because they don't want to know. Yep. But the minute that I said I see someone, you know, with the rainbow flag and the LGBT movement and their Che Guevara shirt, I'm like, dude, like, come on, we have free books everywhere. Like, do you realize that you would have been the first one in the UMAP re-education camps if Che Guevara was alive? Like, come on, people, like, work with me here. Do we have any brains left, or what's going on?
Oh, come on, tell me what you really think.
Yeah, right?
Then number 2, I'm going to get this answer before I let you go. Is it still a bunch of 50s Chevys in Cuba?
Yes, there is, because that was the last year that the government would allow imports from, you know, US made vehicles. Now they might look like a 52 or 57 Chevy. Actually, one of my aunts, they have one that was my grandfather's. I think the chassis on the outside is like a 52 Chevy, and everything inside is like a 51 or 52. My grandpa on my dad's side was a mechanic, so he used to have a car shop before Castro took over. So yeah, they might look like that in the outside, but God knows what kind of like combination of things they have inside. They might have the engine from a Yugoslavian Volga, or the fuel pump might be from a Russian Lada or Moxby. Who knows what's inside? But yeah, they keep it running because we don't have any other choice. We make it work.
Awesome. Well, I really wish we could do this for 2 more hours, but because I have a feeling we could talk for a few more hours, no problem. But is there any last thing you want to share before we close down? And I know also I wanted to know where you work, and if people wanted to get a hold of you or to have you do some work for them or to ask questions. Or the funny thing is that you have a law degree like I do, and neither one of us is practicing law anymore.
Yep.
But what are you doing now? And what else would you like people to know before we sign off?
Well, before we sign out, you know what? I think that seeing what's going on, not only in the United States, but around us all over the world now, the best thing that you can do is just wake up every morning and be grateful for having another day, and do your best to go outside and live as a free individual. Pass that to your children. Like, there is no amount of government or CDC or Fauci that can tell you when to wear a mask or anything inside or outside. Like, I don't have to wait for any government unelected bureaucrat to tell me how to live my life. Okay, as long as we know that we're not infringing on another person's rights and well-being, I would say that the best way to do it is go out every morning, go out every day, and try to live your life as free as you can, given the circumstances, and pass the same message to your kids. Nobody owns me. Nobody ever will. And if 27 years of communist dictatorship and brainwash didn't break me down, hell, an unelected government bureaucrat in the United States is not going to start a trend right now at this point in my life. So that's kind of like to summarize it. And regarding what I do, where I'm small business owners, I have had this small contracting company for the past 6 years. Again, it's kind of like funny. Nothing that I have studied or gone to school for has to do with what I do now. We do mostly painting, interior, exterior painting services, and we also do commercial cleaning services. The biggest bulk of our clients are commercial, but we also do residential. We do work with the school districts and, you know, city and towns, that type of contract.
And this is the Denver area, basically.
We are based in northern Colorado, but we work all over the metro area. I have worked in Aurora, in Littleton. We go all the way to Cheyenne. We're a small business, family business. Like, my dad and my mom work with me, and then we have employees and contractors that come and go depending on the size of the project. And again, it's something that I have never for the life of me imagined that I would do, but I love it. I love to get a project literally like in bare bones concrete and be able to do that finishing all the way till the end, and have, again, that flexibility of being able to take care of my parents, to take care of my kids. Granted, you don't operate on a 40 hours a week ever again once that you become a small business owner, but it's been a very interesting adventure, and I love what I do. I love it.
And are you saying you enjoy making a profit?
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah, no, we are not a charity organization. No, we're not. Yeah, we need to make a profit in order to be able to pay employees living wages. Yeah,
All right.
it
And
doesn't come out of thin
what is
air.
what's the name of your company?
It is called Colorado Residential Commercial Resort and Facility Services. And it's a very long name because when it was time to register with the state database, I needed to find something that had not been taken by somebody already. We go by CRFS. And again, we have our main office. It's in Windsor, in Colorado. And we also have a small subsidiary with some clients in Hilton Head Island in South Carolina.
Oh, okay. So if someone was going to find you on the internet, what's the quickest way?
Yes, the quickest way would be checking our website. It's the same, www.crcrfs.com, and that's where they have all the information. There's some, pictures and samples of the work that we have done. We have a Instagram page where we kind of like share progress in projects and things like that as well.
Awesome. I will put those links in my show notes too.
Perfect. We appreciate it. It's always good to help spreading the word.
That's the way free enterprise works. And
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been just fabulous. I am so deeply appreciative of you coming on and sharing your story with us. I'm glad that you made it out. I hope that more people can make it out, because I think you're right that Cuba is a lost country. I don't see that turning around, just like Venezuela is probably lost now.
And even if that turns around, we're going to need another 60 years and 3 new generations to rebuild everything that has been destroyed. But yeah, I really appreciate the invitation. I always think that, if by opening the eyes of one person, by sharing my crazy Cuban story, I can help, and again, I can open the minds and the eyes of one person, it will be worth it. It will be worth it.
Well, you've opened my eyes big time.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, thank you so much for coming. And this has been Mailyn Salabarria.
There you go. You got it. See, it's just a little bit of practice, all you need.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mailyn.
Thank you, Annette.
And thank you all for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, where freedom lovers gather.